Assalamu alaikum, family, peace, healing, and light. And welcome back to another episode of Healing with Angelica's podcast, where we discuss all things healing. And if you are new to the show, welcome, 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 beautiful souls. On today's episode, we have a returning guest joining us today, my brother Najeem Muhammad. Okay, make sure I said it right. Najeem Muhammad, as we'll be discussing today's topic, a new day of healing, part two. Brother Najeem, welcome and thank you so very much for joining me today. Welcome back. How are you doing?
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm well. How are you doing?
I am doing well by the grace of Allah, embracing this Ramadan. So I'm doing great. Praise be to Allah. And let me see here. Give me 1 second. And Brother Najeem, I know most of everybody know who you are from the previous show, but for our new audience, do you mind letting our audience know just a little bit more about you?
Yes, I don't mind. Yes, firstly, I would like to say, in the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful, I bear witness that there is no God but Allah, and that Muhammad is his messenger. I am a student of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad under the guidance and leadership of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. My name is Najeem Muhammad. I'm 24 years old. I was initially born and raised in the Bay Area of California and moved here when I was 19 in the city of Charlotte, North Carolina. I am currently an author of 2 books, and I have about 3 more on the way. Those books being poetry, one titled Lost Sheep and the other titled Soul Tales. And I'm also a healer as well. I use the therapy called Reiki, and I practice it on myself and I practice it on others in order to heal others from any physical, mental, or psychological problems that they may have.
Yes, yes, yes. Praise be to Allah. And I cannot wait for us to talk about that. Was wanting to talk about that on the last show, but time got the best of us. But we will be talking about that today. So praise be to Allah. Now let's get started on today's episode, a new day of healing. And please, for my audience today, do not let me be the only one asking questions here. If you have any questions for my guest, Brother Najeem Muhammad, please, please, please put your questions in the comment box below. Inshallah, I will strive to get to all of the questions. So, again, we are back to dive a little bit deeper into this subject as we are now in a time of not only a great awakening to the collective, but a time of a new day of healing. And that brings me to my first question for you, Brother Najeem. Now, do you mind explaining how certain physical tools and therapies can be used for healing and its correlation with how we feel spiritually, mentally, and emotionally?
Oh, you hit with the hardening questions already.
I know, I bang, bang, bang.
So, um, I was actually going to therapy when I was 22. So this was 2 years ago in the beginning of the year. My mom, she recommended that I go because of some things I was dealing with myself.
Mhm.
One of the main things being anxiety. And so one of the first meetings, my therapist told me that I should look into getting a book titled Our Body Keeps Score. So basically
Mm.
telling me that the science of the body is that it stores emotions. Sometimes it stores particular experiences, even if we can't have a mental grasp of remembering what happened. And in around 2010, in between the years 2010 2012, the Honorable Minister was Farrakhan introduced some of us to some of a man named L. Ron Hubbard called Dianetics. And basically, the science of Dianetics is that sometimes we're full of things called engrams. And basically, what engrams are triggers. And those triggers takes us back to a particular experience that has caused us trauma or pain. So, for example, if somebody was in an accident, they got hit by a car, for example, if there was a dog barking, if they seen a red truck pass by, if it was sunny, if they heard a certain song passing by through another car that was passing, or
Mm-hmm.
if they heard somebody saying some of those things, they can find themselves later on, because of that trauma that they've experienced in that car accident. If they seen a red truck, if they heard some music passing by, if they heard a particular set of words said in a manner, then they would actually feel the same pain or actually be taken back.
Mm-hmm.
Just like how soldiers, they suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder. And I just want to say this too: it's not just soldiers who fight overseas or who fought in Vietnam or in the world wars or in Iran, but it's
Mm-hmm.
also some of our own Black brothers and sisters who deal with gun violence in the streets every day, right here in America. So, just like how post-traumatic stress disorder, you wouldn't want to hear anything loud like pop, something as simple as a balloon, it would set you off. So, and like this, like even yoga, for example. Sometimes people practice yoga in order to release stress from their body. So, and the most honorable Elijah Muhammad even taught us, even when we study how to live,
Mm-hmm.
whenever there's a physical aspect of something, there's always a spiritual counterpart to it.
Yes.
So, and he even said, in the book How to Live, that some of his followers were writing him that they were practicing how to live, but they weren't getting the results. And
Mm.
you can't, he basically, in words, you can't get the results of how to live if you're not thinking correctly.
Mm.
So, in regards to eating right, also comes with doing right and thinking right.
Yes.
If we're not eating right, then we can't think right. But if we're not thinking right, then we can't feel right either.
Mm-hmm.
There's something called psychosomatic illnesses where you can actually mentally make yourself sick. And sometimes people talk about, dying of a broken heart. Prophet Muhammad actually died from that in his 60s because he was trying to convert a certain people to Islam, but he was heartbroken over that and he died at an early age.
Mm-hmm.
So having these physical tools allows us to be able to release all of that energy that we have, because in essence, though we live in the physical reality, studies show that 99.99% of all the atoms within the earth are energy.
Mm.
So if we're storing all of that energy, then it's going to affect us physically in a matter of time. So if we use those physical tools, all that's doing is really releasing and transferring the energy from negative to positive. But if we're not using that, then eventually our body will keep storing and storing and storing to the point where we won't be able to take anymore. And unfortunately, our bodies won't be able to rest, to be able to repair and to heal. And we end up breaking down much sooner.
Mm. Ooh, a deep question and a great answer. Ooh, praise be to Allah. Oh my gosh, you brought up anxiety, and that was something that I dealt with hard. And even just the use of Dianetics, how much it helped me really understand where is it coming from. Because,
Right.
like you said, we have those engrams of situations that we've been through in our life that may have happened a long time ago, before the womb, not before the womb, before we came out, in the womb,
Mm-hmm.
that still is triggering us without us even knowing. So again, being able to use those different tools like yoga, and we're gonna get to Reiki in a little bit, but I have another question. However, being able to use those tools to be able to identify where the issue is laying at, where the issue lies at, is very beneficial. So praise be to Allah. Now we talked a little bit about the mind. Did you say like psychosomatic illnesses?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, right. So and that's another thing too, like when I was dealing with anxiety, I realized I had to be able to pinpoint, is it really physically something wrong with me? Or is it just my mind telling me this? Or my mind used to these feeling, so believing that something's wrong. So I had to decipher if it was anxiety or if it was really something going on. But most of the time, like you said, with those psychomatic illnesses, your body and your thought, your mind can trick your body into believing that something is really wrong, right? So, my next question for you is, how can one cultivate a healthier mindset for healing?
Mm, mm. Well, I believe it's, it's like what we say, that healing starts within the mind. So, um, it's written in the scriptures that as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. And the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan said that your thoughts can reshape you. So, in order for us to have that healthier mindset, it starts with being able to feed on the things that would allow us to think better.
Mm-hmm.
So, we have to ask ourselves, what are we feeding on that causes us to think the way we do, that really results in our detriment? So, for one, who are we listening to?
Mm-hmm.
What's in our environment? And two, what kind of things did we believe in our childhood? Or what kind of things were we around during childhood? Because usually in childhood, and even when we're in the womb, that's already shaping us mentally, spiritually. These are things that are already shaping us. And so sometimes, whenever we suffer a traumatic experience, it oftentimes becomes a moment where our receptors somehow open up to programming.
Mm-hmm.
Almost like we're being put into a hypnotic state whenever we're in that painful experience. And so, just as the minister said this in the lecture, that sometimes when we're beating our children, sometimes we say certain things,
Mm-hmm.
not knowing that we're giving them certain commands that will eventually affect them later on in the future. And they don't know why it's affecting them. And they don't even know
Mm-hmm.
where it's coming from. They think it's coming from them, or they think it's coming from something that they should be listening to. But in essence, it was given from someone else.
Mm-hmm.
We have to be able to, you know, look within those past experiences to see how did we, how were we programmed to think or believe like this, that's preventing us from thriving as we should,
Mm-hmm.
well as pinpointing the books that we're reading and the context in which we interpret what we're reading too. Because sometimes if we are not studying each word, and just as words shape us as well, because the Bible also says, in the beginning was the word was God, and the word became flesh. Depending on the way we interpret those words also predetermines how they make manifest within us and within the actions that we carry out. So just like how Master Fard Muhammad in the Supreme Wisdom called the called the Bible a poison book, not because
Mm-hmm.
of what the Bible is in essence, but the way that the Bible was misinterpreted and misrepresented by people who had ill motives of
Mm-hmm.
leading and poisoning the people and sucking the life and the resources out of them. So the minister explained that, it broke that down in the lecture titled The Origin of Blackness, which has always been one of my favorites. And I replayed that maybe about 100 times. And I'm going to more because there's always something new I catch. But
Yeah.
he said he called it a poison book, not out of hate, but lovingly. He said,
Mm-hmm.
poison book. He said, well, what is medicine? It's poison. You take too much of it, it'll kill you. But if it's prescribed at the right dosage by a competent doctor, and that which was poison can become medicine.
Mm-hmm.
So, but he said, but if you take poison without understanding, then something happens to you psychologically, mentally, and emotionally. So, by understanding what we're reading in order to reprogram our minds, we have to also let it have understanding too.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not going to understand immediately. So sometimes we have to look at it, accept the truth, and then take time to meditate it on how we can apply it without hurting ourselves. Because sometimes our emotions can cause us to receive truth the moment that we hear it, take it out of context, or exaggerate it to the point where it does more harm than it does good.
Exactly.
Because in essence, Black people are very extreme. We're very extreme because either we depend too much on other people or we don't depend on anybody at all.
Mm.
So, some of us are very codependent, or we've unfortunately have become so codependent on outside resources in order to feed, to clothe, to shelter us, to give us jobs. But then on the other hand, there's some of us who try to do everything by ourselves.
Mm.
So, reading, and it also takes lifestyle habits too,
Mm-hmm.
because we're taught that cleanliness is godliness. And so that means that cleanliness also prepositions us in order to feel like a God, or to think
Yeah.
like, to act like a God. But the opposite of cleanliness is dirtiness. Then the opposite of godliness is, you know what,
Mm-hmm.
you know, you know, in order for us to feel godly, that's a good feeling. That's a good feeling emotionally. That's a good feeling mentally, psychologically. But, practicing everything outside of godliness can be depression, anxiety,
Mm.
corruption, confusion. And I've noticed the more that I've tried to keep a clean atmosphere, take better care of myself, even physically, it gives me a certain energy from that. It makes
Yes.
me good. It makes me feel clear. It makes me feel a little bit more relaxed. Um, Even what we put in our ears too,
Mm-hmm.
because sometimes the loud noises can actually be lowering our vibrations.
Mm-hmm.
There's a chart that I've seen this week actually of the different frequencies. So it goes from 0 hertz to about 250 hertz that the human being can have.
Mm-hmm.
And on the biggest scale, this is when it was joy, happiness, and enlightenment. And then on the bottom, it was anxiety, guilt, shame, anger, bitterness, resentment.
Mm-hmm.
But I was doing that study one morning after I woke up from Fajr. I believe it was maybe the first night, the first day of Ramadan. And I was doing studies, and for some reason, I started looking up how can having too many tabs open on your computer affect you? Affect.
Mm.
So it said it runs slower. It starts having more problems. You start draining the lifespan of that computer.
Mm-hmm.
Myself, I wonder how we can operate if we have too much noise and too much activity going on without having any rest, any peace and quiet. And studies show that having too much loud music within your ear, or having too much going on within your environment, can eventually
Mm-hmm.
lead to more stress and more anxiety, and eventually leading up to you being able to possibly panic more when certain events come about. And so when I saw that, I said, you know what, I'm gonna sit here in silence. And if I do put something on, more than likely I'm gonna put meditation music on.
Mm-hmm.
So, these are steps. Also being able to wake up early too, because even the activity that goes on during the daytime, there's a clutter even in the atmosphere.
Mm. Yes.
So if you're being able to wake up before the sun does, that allows you to get your mind together before everything comes about. And studies show that when you meditate and when you pray and when you read more, that actually boosts your serotonin. That
Mm-hmm.
makes you to feel more calm. That makes you feel more collected. And Sister Iman, actually, the sister who actually attuned me up for Reiki, uh,
Mm-hmm.
I believe this was her. I hope I'm right. But she said they basically did an experiment in the school. And of course, you know, the schools nowadays are very rough, but they were doing they were doing an experiment of you know, because you know, a lot of children nowadays, they have so much noise going on. When they go home, they try to get
Mm,
some next day, there's no quiet. You know, their parents, they drop them off, they blast loud music, and you look in their eyes, you can see the stress and the pain and just the stress that's on them. They said they did a study, so they basically did meditation for 20 minutes within the day and 20 minutes within the afternoon.
mm,
So that there were less fights, they were able to get more done, they were calmer, they even had conflict resolution, a little more of it. So,
mm-hmm,
you know, it really goes to show, you know, the brain has something called brain waves. And so the lower the brain waves are, the more control that you have over your mind.
mm,
And keep in mind, it says brain waves, and the brain has water within it. So if we have too much activity going on within our brains without having quiet and peace of mind and time to recollect and reflect, then
mm-hmm,
eventually what that's going to cause is havoc, because then our minds are going to be going every other way trying to figure certain things out, and the mind is going to be likened to troubled waters.
mm,
Like troubled waters, you know, that's heightening your chances of something happening if you're traveling on a boat or through a cruise, and you might not make it. So the best waters to travel through is through calm waters. And the best
mm,
way to navigate through life and to solve the problems and to be able to make any progress is not with a mind that's full of stress, full of anger, full of bitterness, resentment, you know, full of egotistical tendencies, but a mind that's very calm, collective, accepting. So these are just a few steps, but you know, starting off with that prayer and diet, prayer, meditation, diets, exercising, reading, journaling, reflect
mm-hmm,
on your childhood, as well as to have somebody who can ask you the right questions about your childhood, because there's some things that we can't figure out just solely on our own.
yes,
Sometimes it takes another external force in order for them to be able to look at something that you couldn't look at, or to look at or perceive things a way you couldn't have perceived them. And they can
mm-hmm,
ask you one question, and eventually you say something and you find the answer, and you say, "Oh, so that's why I've been the way I've been."
mm-hmm,
So, also having somebody that you could just talk to. They don't have to figure it out, but sometimes you could just ask certain questions, and within those questions, you can find an answer just from you answering it.
mm-hmm.
Um, so those are just I'll say the basic fundamentals.
Yes, yes, yes. Praise be to Allah. I love that. I love that. And just being able to, again, like I said previously, before being able to identify those problems and being able to incorporate healthier habits to start evolving a healthier mindset. And it's going to take time. It took me some time because of what we're used to. Some of us are is used to distractions. Some people cannot sit in silence. It was a time I couldn't sit in silence. It would irritate me. But
Mm,
now I was like, I love it being able to just sit and meditate and just listen. It's a sense of serenity and peace when it's no chaos. It's in some, like you said, sometimes sound and things that we listen to and take in, a lot of the times is really bringing in more chaos.
yes.
So I love that. Yes, praise be to Allah. So that did make me want to go into my next question here for you, Brother Najeem. So I want to talk about, because you did speak, I think earlier, on how you, when you were younger, you did do some therapy. Um,
Mhm.
Now, how important is it that men engage in unraveling vulnerability and openness?
Ooh, well, expression is our natural birthright. Whenever we don't have any cultural, verbal, spiritual, or even emotional expression, that causes us to go crazy after a while. When you break down the word expression, it starts with EX, meaning out, and pression or press, meaning, pressure. So whenever you're expressing yourself, you're releasing the pressures of life or tragic events or circumstances that have burdened you.
Mm-hmm.
So the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan taught us that confession is good for the soul, because just confessing something to your creator is letting it out, is getting it up off of you. And whenever we don't say something that's really bothering us, eventually that word, that thought becomes that which lingers within a deeper depth within our subconscious. And eventually it has more of a grip on us.
Mm-hmm.
And with that thing having much more of a grip on us, that thing that's bothering us becomes a strain that eventually impedes our ability to be able to relax.
Mm.
And the more it bothers us, eventually becomes something that becomes an actual physical illness. Um, most of what we deal with comes from stress. Most of it comes from stress. And you may find that, I didn't know this either, but Sister Iman was telling us this in Georgia when we were learning Reiki, that, you know, in the Black community, we know what thyroid problems are. Black women know what thyroid problems are. And she said the reason why is because a lot of Black women feel like they're misunderstood. They feel like they don't have a voice. They oftentimes compromise their wealth, their sanity, their dreams and aspirations to be with somebody they don't really love that much, or to be with somebody, or to be in a place or a job or in an environment that really doesn't serve their highest good. So eventually they're compromising the essence of their own truth in their own direction just to
Mm.
appeal to something that's actually a void within them.
Mm-hmm.
Start shutting off their own voice and their own truth. And she said, you find that a lot of Black women have thyroid problems. And I said, wow, I never thought about that. So it's basically the same concept as somebody dying from a broken heart, or basically somebody who feels so nervous on stage they say they got butterflies. That nervousness is more of a psychological or mental thing,
Mm.
but it makes them feel something physical,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
to the point where it's just like, man, I gotta sit down. Like their mouth start drying up, their voice starts trembling. So, whenever we keep a thought buried like that, it's also like keeping something that is waste buried within our body.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not a weakness to talk about something.
Mm-hmm.
It only makes us weaker not letting go of it.
Woo.
And it's how can I say? There's for example, whenever we're working out or exercising strengthens the body, the muscles and the bones.
Mm-hmm.
But there's always a breaking point somebody has. How to Eat to Live has taught us that the stomach is we eat to get energy, but also we can't eat too much, because that which we get our energy from can also be the thing that makes us unhealthy. So there's always a balance or a regulation, and that regulation cannot be crossed unless we start falling to sickness in one way or the other. Whether
Mm-hmm.
little or we get too much of it. So just as the stomach is a muscle and our muscles have to rest within the nighttime in order for it to be stronger once we come back to exercise the next day or the next other day. You know, the mind has to release or to let go of that thought or that feeling or that emotion or that situation that's constantly lingering and doing loops within our psyche.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't take time to let go. Eventually, the mind can't rest. And if the mind can't rest, then eventually that's going to make us sick in the long run.
Yeah.
So eventually, we're going to have to put pride aside and realize that though we are striving to be stronger every day, we can't get stronger if we're not alive to see that strength.
Mm.
So you
Yeah.
have to be able to recognize that, look, it's not, strength is not something that's going to happen overnight. And it can't be something that I can do on my own. So therefore, instead of trying to prove myself and try to step in front of a train, let me leave alone what I can't handle, so that when I'm leaving alone what I can't handle, I'm focusing on what does. What,
Yes.
so that when I'm focusing on what I can handle, I'm getting strength. And if I take the long run and I patiently endure this process by being patient with the process and myself and not knocking myself down because I'm not the strongest person in the earth, then with that time and that patience and that compassion that I show myself, eventually I will be able to handle the things that I can handle.
Mm.
So I was actually reading my Quran earlier this morning, and this actually ties right into what we're talking about now.
Mm. Praise be to Allah.
Anybody who knows the Prophet Muhammad, you know, he has a lot of beautiful parables that he spoke. And I wish I can find it here because it was just so wonderful reading it. Yes, so it's in the third chapter, the 159th verse. So
Mm.
anybody who knows Prophet Muhammad, he had a lot of beautiful parables, speaking of the beauty of Allah, the grace of Allah, speaking a word of kindness, being kind, compassionate, and loving to your wife,
Mm-hmm.
and to orphans, to each other. But he was also a general too. So in this footnote, so it says in this verse, it says, "Thus it is by Allah's mercy that thou art gentle to them. And had
Mm.
thou been rough, hard-hearted, they would certainly have dispersed from around thee. So pardon them and ask protection for them, and consult them in important matters. But when
Mm.
thou hast determined, put thy trust in Allah. Surely
Yeah.
Allah loves those who trust in him." So in this footnote, not every verse in the Quran has it, but in verse that needs very specific context, there's footnotes. So this footnote says that it is remarkable that the Holy Quran calls attention to the Prophet's gentle dealing with those around him when speaking of his experience in the field of battle as a
Yeah.
leading his men against overwhelming forces, a capacity which required him to be very strict in punishing any delinquency. But he was not a mere general. His ability in leading his men in occupying positions of advantage in the field of battle and in directing a handful of men to face 3, 4, and sometimes 10 times their own number marks
Mm-hmm.
as the ablest general the world has ever seen. Yet, his gentle manners and his practical forbearance in dealing with his friends, as well as foes, stand in remarkable contrast with his capacity as a commander in the field of battle. It is related that after the Uhud trouble, the prophet did not speak even a harsh word to those who were guilty of disobeying his orders.
Mm.
So that's showing us that even within the heat of battle, within
Mm.
our moment of trying to survive, within trying to get certain things done that are a strain to our body, our minds, or even that's a risk of danger, there's still compassion there. There's still kindness there. That's not weakness, but it's wisdom. in order to properly navigate others and to navigate ourselves into getting from one stage into another. So just as, we say pressure makes diamonds, but pressure is not always on the diamond. Eventually, it has to come off after the pressure in order for the cool to come, in order for that diamond to shine.
Drop the mic.
There's, so, that's teaching us that there's a time and a place for everything. And so vulnerability, kindness, and compassion has to be exercised amongst men, not weak,
Mm-hmm.
not allowing us to be able to be weak and to do anything that we want. That's not the case. But to be very intentional and to be very wise about how we talk to one another, how we express ourselves, and what kind of avenue of freedom of expression we give to one another. Because sometimes we say certain things maliciously,
Mm.
and that drives people away. That makes the person not want to be around them.
Yes.
And so, of course, we like to say in the Black community, I'm hard on you because I love you. Hard on me because of love or because you're an enemy.
Mm.
Because I might be able to distinguish, because you're a family member, you actually love me and I can trust you. But
Yes.
psychologically and soulfully or spiritually, I might not be able to tell the difference or who or what you are. So that's just part of the reason why, we should have that. Because compassion actually, if you really study compassion, COM, meaning multiple or a few or a compound. So when you're exercising compassion, then you're actually accentuating the passion and the drive and the strength and the aspiration of a person.
Mm.
That avenue that you're giving them actually is lifting them up. So that when you go back out, you be like, okay, now we're stronger. Now we're more collected. Now we can do what we have to do.
Yes, praise be to Allah. And that's actually like one of my favorite parts in the Quran when that's talked about. It made me just think about just how we all should just be in general, even if we're not in leadership position, we should always be compassionate, and that is really what's going to be able to keep that brotherhood or that sisterhood when you may be in a position of higher power, being able to have understanding and being light sometimes. And sometimes, I mean, I guess sometimes you need a little hardness, but
Mm.
most times we do need some light and kind words.
Yeah.
I would say it made me think about the feminine side, because we all carry that. Men and women, we have that duality,
Yes.
so
Yeah.
praise be to God.
Uh, it's like I like to use the minister for example, because
Mhm,
Brother Don Enoch was on I Have a Testimony by
mhm.
the minister Brother Willie Muhammad. He shared a time where he actually minister had to correct him on something, and the way he told it was just funny. But oh, he talked about how he scheduled a phone call for a celebrity to speak with the minister, but during the day of, that's when it hit him where he didn't ask the minister for it to basically have the right of way to go ahead and go through with it.
Mhm.
And so basically, long story short, the minister was very firm with him twice actually within the same day. And sometimes when he would see him, he would just sometimes look at him like, I can't believe you did that. And but at the end, when they were having dinner, they had the laborers, they had certain laborers, certain people at the table. The minister said, brother, he pointed at him and he pointed right next to him, meaning, come sit right here. Saying like, I disciplined you earlier, but brother, I love you. Come on, have some dinner with me. So there's a, you know, it's very wise to be very intentional of assuring the person that I'm not doing this to hurt you, but I'm doing it to build you up, to make sure that you know that I want you to get better and better and improve yourself in your ways as a human being. And just as the Holy Quran says that there's a time for day and a time for night, when it comes down to choosing our enemies or our friends, we don't pick any middle ground. So for anybody who, deliberately or even unintentionally give certain mixed signals when they say that they mean one thing for a person, but they're doing another that makes the person feel the total opposite, eventually that can draw confusion within the person's mind, thinking that who are my real friends or who are my real enemies? Because the people who making me feel my friends are always making me feel inferior, and I'm feeling weak, and I can't be able to build myself up. And so it's important, especially considering what's going on today. We have to understand who our real friends and who our real enemies are. And the best way that we can do that is to be able to examine the actions of the person. And all of our friends are not always going to feel good, but the intentions are always made very clear. So a friend, of course, it's like, for example, in the Quran, it's talking about both punishment and purification. And both of them deal with fire. So whether fire don't feel comfortable, nobody wants to get burned willingly. That's not comfortable. But the question is, under what threshold is the fire being prescribed, which will also predetermine what the end goal is. So a person who may occasionally hurt me or may say things that hurt is saying that as a friend because he wants me to feel good. But if I'm constantly feeling hurt, then okay, it's like, that's what an enemy does. So that when things really start to unfold and unravel, and when our real enemy shows about, we'll be able to show the difference, because it for sure won't be a middle ground when stuff really hits the fan.
Whew. Drop the mic on that one. That was beautiful. Praise be to Allah. And if you all are enjoying this episode just as well as I am, please, please, please show your support by donating today to Cash App $Healing with Angelica to help sustain future episodes just like this. Also, if you are enjoying all of the broadcasts here on CTV Broadcast, please show your support as well by donating today. Information to donate will be shown on your screen below. I love you all. Now let's get back to today's episode, A New Day of Healing Part 2 with our brother Najeem Muhammad. And also, if you guys are enjoying the show, give me some interaction. Put some fire in the comment box. I need some interaction now. Give my brother some questions. Praise be to Allah. So, my next question here for you is, it's so many different questions I gotta ask. It's like time be going so fast. I have all these questions, but we're gonna strive to get through them all, like I stated. So I would like to talk about Reiki. Reiki is a tool that I actually, brother Dr. Akili Muhammad, I love him so much, actually helped me on my journey of healing before I even joined the nation. And I had a thyroid issue,
Wow.
and he actually, I connected with him, and he just told me about all these different things I can do. But one thing that stood out to me was Reiki. I'm like, what's Reiki? So I started doing Reiki on myself. Now I am gonna say, I'm gonna be honest with you. Life been lifing. I haven't been consistent. However, Reiki has been such a beautiful tool for me personally, because it allows me to be able to regroup and reconnect with myself. I feel like it's another way of meditation.
Mm-hmm.
So I would like to know, let's talk about Reiki and what inspired you to take that on as a tool of healing.
Well, I must say that there were believers, particularly sisters that were old enough to be my mom who planted the seed within my head. From Sister Vanessa out of New Jersey, Sister Angela out of Florida. They were mainly, putting the planting the seed within my head. I was like, Reiki, what is that? I mean, it sounded cool to me. I just didn't understand it.
Mm-hmm.
So actually, I always knew that I was a healer. That was just the title that just resonated with me.
Mm-hmm.
Healing. And I always knew I was here to help people, to basically give them a sense of restoration in order to heal from what they've gone through. That reality definitely started to sink in when I was 18, long before I made the conscious decision that I wanted to join.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that hit me. And so I wrote my first book titled Lost Sheep when I was 21. And started when I was 20, put it out when I was 21. Took about 6 to 7 months to complete it, and about 2 to 3 tries writing the whole thing. And the concept was actually me, constantly praying and meditating, barely even leaving the house. Praying, meditating, being very strict on my diet and very strict on prayers, to the point where I would have, constant, experiences where I would actually see things physically while I'm meditating. And I would sometimes, travel while I'm sleeping, and, have certain lucid dreams. So, I mean, it was a very strict regimen. And I was able to connect with like the depths of my subconscious where I really wanted to go with the concept of this book. And the concept was actually me finding a certain way to connect to the child version of myself in order to bridge the gap between where I am now and a part of me that I left behind during certain circumstances in my childhood.
Mm-hmm.
So, I've always heard that sometimes people stop aging during the time that something traumatic happens within their life.
Mm-hmm.
Almost as though a piece of them has been left behind or stripped away, and that piece of them will not go beyond that traumatic experience that they suffered.
Mm-hmm.
So, they're thinking about a time that they were happy and the time that was stripped away from them because of that thing that happened.
Mm-hmm.
So I ended up actually, you know, manifesting a certain breakthrough that I had to carry out, that I'm still doing to this day.
Mm-hmm.
I realized that it wasn't one particular action, but it was a protracted amount of steps. It was a certain amount of steps during a protracted period of time that I had to carry out in order to heal that particular wound.
Mm-hmm.
Healing that wound will also come being able to help other people deal with those wounds as well.
Yes.
So I wrote the book, and the end of it had to deal with going back home. And I'm gonna show you because I have the book right here. When I when I showed certain people the cover, a sister said, that looks a lot like Reiki. And I said, really? And I thought about it, and I was just like, okay. And I remember Sister Vanessa, she actually got me a book about Reiki for beginners. And I was like, oh, that's nice. I was like, okay, just put it in the shelf. I don't know what to do with it.
Yeah.
And, I didn't know that she was actually planting seeds over a period of time,
Mm.
because, something told her like, he needs it. And I did. And she actually practiced it on me one time before I learned it myself. Um, and what she saw was that when she got to my heart, she said, when I got there, it felt like somebody was stabbing me. So, you know, that what that told me was that there were certain pains that I was dealing with that I didn't even confront.
Mm.
And that's when she introduced me to Sister Iman. And what I began to learn as I was getting Reiki done on myself, they weren't even present in the room with me.
Mm.
So I was asking her, I was like, how does that work? She said, there's a certain symbol in Japanese. And basically, this allows the energy to travel long distance through the past, the present, and the future.
Mm.
So I said, that's what I was looking for. A way to go back, just like how you can do in auditing,
Mm-hmm.
asking you over and over again to a certain memory where you develop a certain engram, and it keeps telling you, go back and see what you can remember. Go back and see what you can remember. They say it over and over again until you can pick up every single little detail.
Mm.
Times people get very uncomfortable, basically. Sometimes they might be aggressive, but the auditor is not supposed to pay that any mind. But what
Yeah.
they're showing is that I was really having a communication with the depths of my subconscious about a journey that I had to take. And it eventually led me into learning Reiki. So really
Mm.
it was my writing that led me up to it. It was. And that writing manifested people and circumstances, and it led me to certain places where I can learn the therapy and then use it on myself. And by the grace of Allah, since I've used it, I've seen a lot of improvements.
Oh wow. Whew. Oh my gosh, I love that. It and when you brought up how when the sister went towards your heart and she could the energy she felt right there in that location, because that's what it does. I've tried Reiki on my like I said, I've tried Reiki on myself, haven't tried it on others yet, and I definitely want to get into that more as a form of healing, because we have healing in our hands. Like there's energy in our hands that we're able to really feel things that, because I know when I did it, it was like heat. I would feel this warm heat in certain parts of my body.
Hmm.
And I'm like, okay. It was kind of weird at first, but it was cool. Because, like, okay, I'm tapping into myself. I'm tapping into this part of me that is like, okay, something new and different. However, I love Reiki, and I'm so glad we talked more about that. So praise be to Allah. I do have one more question before we end today's show. I think this is so important when it comes to the new day of healing. You spoke on the mental aspects of how we can develop a healthier mind for this new day of healing, right? However, how important is physical care, like eating right and exercising, in this new day in healing?
Well, you actually, within exercise, you actually release certain hormones that deal with stress.
Mm.
And so, with exercising, it helps to really stimulate your mind to, feel better and think better. Um, and with eating, of course, nowadays it's very difficult to find something that's good.
Mhm.
Very difficult to find something that's good and healthy. And but people who are very wise and who understand biochemistry willingly do things to tamper with food in order to tamper with our thoughts. And thoughts and emotions produce chemicals. Chemicals, when we inject them, also produce thoughts. So chemicals and thoughts and emotions go hand in hand. So if you can find a way to manipulate your thought or your emotion, you're reversing or changing the chemistry within the human being.
Mm.
Manipulate the chemistry, you can also dictate the thoughts or the emotions of somebody.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look, if you really look, like, just like how everything is energy, everything is energy, things make you feel certain things. Um, Food has energy too. Food has life in it.
Mm.
When it becomes artificial, when it becomes man-made, when it starts becoming a social experiment, then eventually something happens to us where it actually corrupts the nature in which our body is supposed to function. And anything that's corrupted also causes problems. I saw a wasp in my window, but it causes certain problems psychologically anytime something, the natural order of things are disturbed.
Mm-hmm.
So it's important to develop those things because when you eat right, you can think right. And really, if we come from the earth, we should be eating things that come from the earth.
Mm-hmm.
And we're a pure prototype of something that comes from the earth. So we should definitely be eating things that come from the earth as well. That's just like a natural law of compatibility. And anything that's really artificially man-made does not belong within us because we're not man-made, we're God-made.
Yes.
So if we're God-made, and anything that God has created in order to serve us, we should be able to use to the best of our abilities. So those physical therapies are so important because it reconnects us back to our essence, and we're able to remove anything that does not align with that essence.
Mm.
And that's why that's why I like to go on nature walks so much, because the energy rubs off on me and it brushes away anything negative, because nature has a pure energy to it. And not to say that those nature walks or this healing therapies are supposed to replace prayer, because no, they're not. They're not supposed to replace study or the renewing of our mind either. But what it can do is remove some of that energy, or some of that, some of those memories which are plaguing our ability to be receptive to the renewing. And because we could be healing all day long, but if we constantly go back to that which causes the damage, then that's when the tool doesn't really benefit us.
Mm.
But it's like being able to shift our mood, to be able to shift our energy in a way to the point where, okay, now let me go back and try to use the tools to better myself and to be closer to God. And so in a way it enhances the experience. And sometimes we may try to argue that we don't need it,
Mm.
but some of us can't go without music, but that's damaging us.
Mm.
So why not why not try to go for things that make us operate on a higher vibration? So it's like so that's why it's important. And
Yeah.
you come to find that when you eat certain things, when certain things have particular vegetable oils or like corn oils or whatever, sometimes
Mm-hmm.
it literally makes you feel more depressed. Because I mean, kind of think about it, it's like putting the wrong gas in your car. We're supposed to intake, things like black seed oil or water, tea. But there's certain oils that really don't belong within this body.
Yes.
And when it's corrupted like that, it messes us up. Things that are full of salt, you can still hear me, right?
Yes, sir. Mm-hmm.
Things that are full of salt or full of sugar, that messes with our brain.
Mm-hmm.
there's certain people who make certain sugars that rearrange the compounds that actually has an effect on how our brain operates, whether we're drawn more to it or it just makes us feel like we're going crazy.
Yes.
But if we're eating right, then that definitely helps us to think right as well. In reality, like how everything is a word, like in the beginning was the word and the word became flesh, then the essence of all of creation is a word. And so in order for us to have and keep a good word and reassure ourselves within our minds that everything is going to be okay through means of feeling clarity, feeling energy, then of course the food might be a means of us being able to hold on to that word of clarity and
Woo! Praise be to Allah. I love that. I definitely wanted to tap into the physical area and the how food and eating the right foods can help us in this new day of healing. I could definitely testify on that. As with anyone who has anxiety, there is certain food that can, I want to say aggravated, cause it to come up more. Foods that can cause depression because of how it can change certain chemicals and hormones in our bodies. So, in order for us to really embark on this new day of healing, we need to really think about just our mental, our physical, and our spiritual being and how we're feeding all of that each and every day. So, praise be to Allah. Brother Najeem, thank you, thank you, thank you so much for joining me again to discuss this amazing topic, A New Day of Healing Part 2. I would also like to thank my amazing audience in Healing Tribe for joining us today. I pray that this episode was informative, valuable, and of course, always healing to you all. Also, be sure to share, like, follow, and subscribe so you don't miss out on any upcoming episodes on your favorite podcast station. Closing the Gap broadcast on Facebook, CTG broadcast on YouTube, and Healing with Angelica's podcast on Facebook and YouTube to help spread this message of healing to those that are in need. Also, if you are ready to start your healing journey and don't know where to start, Healing with Angelica is here to assist as I am offering free one-on-one calls for the month of Ramadan to help get you started on your healing journey. More information to schedule your call will be shown in the comment section below, including Healing with Angelica merch and more that's now on sale for the month of Ramadan. So definitely take advantage of that. Also, a friendly reminder, please, any purchases that you all make, it helps to sustain and support Healing with Angelica. So just please keep that in mind. Also, if anyone or yourself are in need of prayer, Healing with Angelica would like to send a special prayer to you, and you can do this by emailing us at healwithangelica@yahoo.com. All praises due to Allah. Brother Najeem, before we end today's show, do you have any closing remarks for our audience today?
I would just like to say for anybody who's watching, like she said, please support this podcast with Healing with Angelica, with just purchasing the merch, tuning in, sharing with family and friends, and donating. And just as you said, with those consultations, take advantage of it, because I got my appointment on this afternoon, because the healers need some healing too.
Yes,
They help
we
some
do.
and others.
Whew, talk about it. Whew. Praise be to Allah. Thank you so much, Brother Najeem. It was a pleasure to have you back on the show. You spoke so much life right now and you gave so much great information and how we can navigate in this new day of healing. So I love you all. And until we meet again, thank you all for joining us. And we leave you as we came. Assalamu alaikum. Peace,
All right.
healing, and life.